was not only a battle for independence from Pakistan, but a bold vision for a secular, pluralistic state, a nation where every citizen, regardless of faith or ethnicity, could thrive. That war's sacrifices birthed a country committed to dignity and democracy, a flame that still burns in millions of hearts. Yet today that promise is under siege. It is threatened by violence, division, and the erosion of the very values for which Bangladeshis once fought for and died. But let us be clear about what had happened. In August 2024, a student-led uprising toppled Sheikh Hasina's 15-year administration. This collapse, as documented by the UN Human Rights Office, was marked by over 1,400 deaths. Once celebrated for advancing UN Sustainable Development Goals, Hasina's government was becoming accused of veering away from democracy. She was also accused of gutting institutions, silencing the media, politicizing courts, and crushing dissent. A UN fact-finding report in February 2025 found reasonable grounds for crimes against humanity, a damning indictment of a leadership that traded liberty for stability. For too long, the international community praised Bangladesh's economic gains while ignoring the hollowing out of its democratic soul. That era of complacency had to end someday. It wasn't sustainable. The interim government, led by Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, stepped in at a volatile moment with a mandate for reform. Many, myself included, greeted his appointment with a cautious hope. Perhaps this was a chance to restore the supremacy of the Sangsad, Bangladesh's parliament, to empower citizens to shape their future and to deliver justice instead of impunity. Yet nearly a year later, my hopes have faded, and so have those of many Bangladeshis. Yunus's leadership has been a disaster. The Awami League, representing millions, was banned and branded as a fascist movement, a grotesque distortion despite its leadership failures. Criminalizing a vast swathe of the population is a recipe for ruin, echoing the catastrophic de-Baathification what we saw in Iraq. We've also seen a former US diplomat who's been pushing for similar purges, risking Bangladesh's descent into chaos. We do teeter on the edge of an Iraq-style failure in Bangladesh, with mob rule and violence wielded as a political weapon. Where still, a mass erasure of history is underway in Bangladesh. We saw the vandalism at Dhanmondi 32, Bangabandhu's home, which was not just an attack on bricks and mortar, it was an assault on Bangladesh's soul. Mahfouz Alam, the mastermind of the Monsoon Uprising and an advisor for information and broadcasting for Yunus, is known to be an admirer of Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution. His influence has been poison, orchestrating a campaign to rewrite Bangladesh's past. We've also seen them portraying the Chhatra League as something akin to Hitler Youth, which is also a vile distortion, fueling division when unity is so desperately needed. Some, like the National Citizen Party, still just this last week have labelled Bangladesh a fascist state, an approach that I reject. These calls only deepen wounds, not heal them. Bangladesh is not fascist, nor should we embrace the politics of endless division. But human rights are in freefall. The Bangladesh Hindu Buddhist Christian Unity Council reported over 2,000 cases of violence against minorities since the fall of Sheikh Hasina. We've seen attacks on Hindus, indigenous people, Christians, Ahmadi. We've even seen Sufi Muslims in Bangladesh coming under assault. Today, they published that there have been 2,442 cases in the last 11 months. In the Chittagong Hill Tracts, we've seen indigenous people face systematic land grabs, often with local authority complicity. The Rohingya continue to suffer with Amnesty International. They put out a statement in March which said that there was a worsening marginalization, that there have been aid restrictions, and there have been massive funding shortfalls. To me, this is not progress. This is a disgrace. Press freedom, the cornerstone of any democracy, is also under relentless attack. The Committee to Protect Journalists 2025 report ranks Bangladesh among the world's worst for imprisoning journalists. There are at least 13 who are currently detained on fabricated charges, according to DW Bangla. Freedom House's 2025 Freedom in the World report details ongoing censorship and harassment, with surveillance tools once wielded by the Awami League now being repurposed. In March of this year, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the Committee to Protect Journalists and Fortify Rights issued a joint letter urging the Yunus administration to halt violent attacks on journalists. Risk and Analysis Group findings were also stark. They've said that over 640 journalists have been harassed, 74 been attacked, 113 have faced criminal charges, and 167 have lost their press credentials. Ask, another group, has reported over 398 incidents of attacks and harassment on journalists between August 2024 and March 2025. So the repression is continuing. We've also seen attacks on the Daily Star and Protham Along, Bangladesh's largest newspapers, who have been targeted by radical Islamist protesters, who have been incited by other anti-India and anti-Hindu religious groups. The organization's signboards have been vandalized. We've seen attacks and an attempted break-in into their premises with fires, just because they've been promoting secularism and women's rights. The interim government responded with police protection, but there's been no accountability for the perpetrators. Mahfouz Anam, the editor of Daily Star, has described a coordinated smear campaign and targeted attacks against them. In a newspaper editorial, they said, this has been a rude awakening for those who expected the culture of intimidation and repression to recede with the ouster of an autocratic regime. No credible grievances have been presented to justify these attacks. They appear to be driven by an agenda to discredit independent media and to deter it from fulfilling its watchdog role. Even worse, we've seen Bangladesh's Financial Intelligence Unit freezing the bank accounts of journalists. This has created an atmosphere of terror and self-censorship in Bangladesh. On the 8th of July, 2025, 51 journalists issued a joint statement on X condemning, open quote, unprecedented threats to press freedom, end quote, under Yunus, including arrests, media takeovers, and violent intimidation. So repressive laws remain. The 1974 Special Powers Act is still in force. We've seen arbitrary arrests, which have now become a feature of Yunus's administration. These have surged, with mass detentions replacing reform. The proposed Cyber Protection Ordinance of 2025, intended to replace the Digital Security Act, still criminalizes offensive speech violating international standards. Meanwhile, in the political vacuum, they have unleashed radical Islamists, which threaten the secular ideals of 1971. Jamaat-e-Islami, once banned, is now back, allowing to practice its politics. Hafizat-e-Islam is pushing for theocratic rule in Bangladesh. The New York Times warned in April 2025 the hardliners and convicted terrorists were exploiting this moment. Women and indigenous peoples are bearing the brunt as radical fronts like Students for Sovereignty harass students. The economic cost of this crisis is severe. Human rights abuses are deterring investors and donors. The World Bank's 2025 Bangladesh Economic Update warned that political unrest could cost billions in lost trade and investment. The likelihood that there will be a brain drain will worsen that economic situation, as skilled professionals will flee violence and repression. European partners must recognize human rights and economic stability are inseparable. Ignoring one endangers the other. The ABF rejects this chaos. Bangladesh needs unity, not rage. Reconciliation, not scapegoating. And as The Economist and the UN have stressed, banning the Awami League undermines peace. It is certainly not an inclusive. And if we see an election happening in the spring, it will not be inclusive if the Awami League is not allowed to take part. Democracy means every citizen has a stake, including Awami League supporters. Through fair elections, while holding leaders to account for past abuses must be done, but there needs to be inclusivity. Inclusivity, not mob rule, is the antidote. It is only by ensuring that power bows to law and not violence or street power that Bangladesh can thrive. The ABF isn't beholden to any government. We were founded to confront such moments. Our mission is to amplify Bangladeshi Europeans and advocate for a nation where every citizen enjoys equal rights. We propose 4 urgent priorities. Number 1, protect minorities. Investigate attacks, deliver justice, and enact policy to shield Hindus, indigenous peoples, and all vulnerable communities such as the LBQT plus and the Ahmadis and Christians who are under threat from fundamentalists. Number 2, repeal repressive laws. Scrap the 1974 Special Powers Act and the Cyber Protection Ordinance of 2025, as urged by Amnesty International and the Committee to Protect Journalists. Journalists must be free from fear. Arbitrary arrests must end. 3, to counter radicalism in Bangladesh. Ban groups inciting violence, uphold pluralism, and ensure that the 1972 Constitution is not betrayed. Protect women and all vulnerable groups in Bangladesh. Publicly shame groups who threaten others. 4, we want accountability for student fronts. Parent parties must be held responsible for the violence of their student and youth wings. Campuses should be for learning, not for protection rackets. To our European partners, prioritize human rights over trade or migration deals. For too long, geopolitical interests have drowned out Bangladesh's cries. So we need to engage the diaspora in Brussels, Westminster, Berlin, and Rome. In 2024, UK Bangladeshi groups petitioned the British government to raise this issue, proving our collective impact. We bridge Bangladesh and Europe. We carry Bangladesh's dreams. So please join our campaign. Petition the EU for stronger human rights oversight. Support the EBF through donations and volunteering. Write to your representatives. Use your platforms, whether it's social media or other groups, to amplify this crisis. Promote education programs teaching tolerance and countering radicalization. These are the steps that can turn rhetoric into reality. The antidote to mob rule is radical inclusivity in Bangladesh, ensuring every Bangladeshi, from Awami League supporters to minorities, is part of the national story. From the ashes of 1971 rose a nation of democracy and dignity. That flame still burns. Here and across the diaspora, this webinar is a call to action. Let us form coalitions, draft recommendations, and amplify the voices of the marginalized to build a Bangladesh of equality and hope. Thank you. So first of all, I would like to introduce our speakers here, and the first one is Pushpita Gupta. She's the president of Secular Bangladesh Movement UK, and she's a Labour Party councillor in Redbridge, London. She is a Bangladeshi Hindu advocating for Hindu minority rights in Bangladesh. And since 2024, in the political crisis, she has addressed the British Parliament and others and urged global leaders to protect Bangladeshi Hindus from violence and to secure the release of ISKCON monk Chinmay Krishna Das while pushing for secularism and Hindu safety in Bangladesh. And Pushpita, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Unmute, please.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Chris, for connecting me. And you actually said it all, and it was a really good to hear. You know, like somebody is actually acknowledging what is happening in Bangladesh. And in terms of minorities, in recent days is actually is beyond words. You know, we had a festival called Rath Yatra, and you probably heard it has been celebrated worldwide, and it's a fun festival. And in Bangladesh, the ISKCON, the people who celebrates Rath Yatra, and because Chinmay Krishna Das Prabhu, he was the leader of one of the leaders in ISKCON, and they were told if they take his name during this celebration, they will destroy it. They will destroy the temple. And it was clearly coming from government officials. Threatened not by the police officers only, by the the army officers were, like threatened people. You cannot, the ISKCON members, you cannot take Chinmay Krishnadas's name if you want to celebrate Rath Yatra. That just happened like a week ago. And followed by that, you have probably known there was a temple, and they were told is built in government railway place or somewhere not legally been built, which I accept. It's not been legally built, the temple, but there was no communication. So every temple have their own committees, every temple have their own people who you can sit down, discuss, negotiate, and all the temples have their own deities, so they have different deities in different temples. So these people are the people who are the followers of the temples or the deities. They treat these deities like as their family members, like their mothers. They treat them like their own children. They feed them 3 times a day. They do prayers. They even given them bath. Some of the deities, they given them bath, and they pray, they're given them new clothes, and it's like a part of their family members. This is how they treat these deities in the temple. And these deities were they were destroyed. Not only destroyed, they were taken by bulldozer in Bangladesh, and it was announced by these jihadis in Bangladesh. Jihadis announced the day before, it will be destroyed tomorrow. It did not come from government; it came from jihadis. The action was taken by the government next day. While if you have seen these videos, the women were actually lying down and begging them not to destroy that. So there were no negotiation, even if it is illegally built. Everybody has their right. Everybody, like to protect their families, protect their deities, protect their temples or their belongings. But they were not given any opportunity to protect their temples. And then recently you have noticed, or you have seen, or you have heard, I must have heard, there was a rape victim who were raped, not only raped, and her video was put on Facebook, and it was viral like anything. So this is the present situation of Bangladesh. But my concern is, yes, I'm very concerned about the community, Hindu communities in Bangladesh, but I'm more concerned about minors, the blasphemy law. The blasphemy law are putting on the minors, and these minors are like children to me. They are children. They don't know anything. Some of them just today there was a GCSE exams results came out in Bangladesh, and these are the children. So they are not even 16. Some of them not even 16. So they uses Facebook. And they were forced to say things like they were criticized about their deity, they were criticized about their religion. So sometimes these young bloods, this young generation, they were forced to say something against Islam or against Nabi or somebody, because they were criticizing their religion. And these children were taken away. They given a blasphemy law, and putting them in jail. And this is an ongoing issue in Bangladesh. Sometimes even these children not even using Facebook. Some of these cases we have noticed they don't even use Facebook, or they are not even present in particular areas. And they were given a blasphemy law. They are saying, oh, this person said something on Facebook, this person did something against Islam, but they're not even present there. They're not even, it's like somebody is not in Chittagong, but their case against them because they did done something in Chittagong, but they are not in Chittagong. You have noticed this, the university professor. We have we have only 7% Hindus in Bangladesh, if I'm not wrong. and many of them are not very vocal because they're scared. They're scared, and I'm not blaming them. Because they are scared. Everybody have rights to live their life, and everybody have rights to protect their children, protect their families, protect their daughters. Families who have teenager girls, they are living in fear. And we have a university professor. You have recently noticed the Kushal Boran Chakraborty in Chittagong University, and he's a scholar. He knows about Hinduism. He knows about the actual, like how to teach the religion, Hinduism, and the Sanskrit and all that. And he's one of the million who speaks, who knows things, and who is brave enough to say things on Facebook. But I did not see a single word he said against the Yunus government or against any government. I would say anything. He talks about Hindus' rights. He purely talks about Hinduism. And recently he was supposed to get the promotion. So in Bangladesh, I think it's a procedure that they have to sit down for an exam, or they have to go through some kind of procedure to get this promotion. So he's due to have the promotion. Because he is due to have a promotion, so there was a mob. They were organized mob attacked him not only once, twice, in front of his boss, in front of his chancellors, and nobody even contacted him. No. The police officers, army officers, nothing, because he was kind of like attacked by the mob, and they put on live on Facebook. So this is the present situation of Bangladesh. So I spoke to him yesterday, and I asked him, "Do you still have the job?" And his answer was, "I even don't know if I have the job." So he was asking me my suggestion, what he should do. I left Bangladesh 28 years ago, and many of the I don't know Bangladesh, the laws of law and order, how does it work, to be honest. And then for me, he is a university professor. He should go and do his job. He's teaching children. He's a teacher. I work with special needs children, and this is my job, and I go to school to teach my children. If there any issue, my head teacher should call me and sit down and talk with me. So it's not children, it's not students who make the decision. The university teacher should come to the university or teach them or not. It's the chancellors, is the boss. There are people. If they have any issues, they should have called him up, sit down, have a meeting and discussion. So this is the present situation. The most importantly, as you have mentioned everything, you have included all these violations going on in Bangladesh. The problem is Dr. Yunus he's not acknowledging anything. This is where the problem is creating every single day, because one, he is, I'm really not very sure, because he's a Nobel laureate. How can you hate one of the groups in Bangladesh, and every time something happens to Hindus, he will come to media and say it is India's propaganda? So he's the father of the Bangladesh, I would say. He's the main person of Bangladesh. If he doesn't acknowledge what is happening to his citizen, then how can you expect to neighbors or his authorities or his armies or his police officers or other organization will come and protect his citizen? It's him first to acknowledge and saying, even the rape victim, we saw videos on Facebook, there were no regret, no sorries, nothing, no discussion, and it is like I feel like they're doing it deliberately, and he's the one who is telling people go and do it. And and you have mentioned today we have the report from Hindu Buddha Unity Council, and you have seen the amount of the even police officers. To be honest, we have a police report, I think back in December, and a police actually acknowledged back in December or January, if I'm not wrong. So out of 2,000, police actually reported out of 2,000, 1,500 incidents were correct. And that actually happened. The police reported, they acknowledged it, but then his chief advisor or chief advisors, the press secretary, coming on social media, and he's giving, and no, this is not happening. This is happening because it's a political, because people are angry, and these Hindu people supported Awami League. I'm not taking much more of your time, because you mentioned I'm a councillor in Redbridge. I must acknowledge there are 3 councillors, Hindu councillors, were killed in Bangladesh because they're supporters of Awami League. And one of the councillors were a woman. She was raped, and when she was in hospital, so they wanted her not to tell their names. She was poisoned and killed. So this is the present situation of Bangladesh. So when I'm being introduced as a councillor, first thing it comes to my mind, am I being targeted because I support Labour Party? No, I never felt like that. Why my fellow colleagues in Bangladesh have to live in fear? This is purely discouraging women to come forward and do politics. They're purely discouraging Hindus to come forward and go for like university professors, or go for any kind of, like, you have report that there are a lot of police officers who were been even before they even appointed, they were saying, no, you are not taken, your name has been dismissed. So this kind of incident, this kind of discrimination going on since 5th of August. So it is like, it's not only discouraging people to come forward, it is being like people don't want to live in the country anymore. People, fathers who have a daughter, teenage daughters, they're asking, where shall I go? They're scared to send their daughters to go to school, college, universities. There are young, not even young girls, I would not say, there are babies who are 3 years old, went to buy chocolate, she was raped. There were a girl in previous government, there was a girl, 4 years old girl, who was raped, but she survived. But what happened to the rapist? He was in jail in previous government. Now, Unionist government set him free. So he is living on the street amongst those young children. So what do we expect from this rapist who are coming out from the jail? They're not going to change overnight. What are we going to expect from these killers who killed my brothers? And there are the killers who killed my own mom. There are people who grabbed my own home, and they are set free. They are not in jail. What do we expect from them? So this is present Bangladesh. Thank you for listening, and thank you for raising this.
Thank you for that testimony, Pushpita. Next, we're going to move on. My other guest, Mr. Sumas Chakma. He's one of the leaders of the Global Association for the Indigenous Peoples of the Chittagong Hill Tracts. He's a New Delhi-based human rights advocate for the Juma people. Also, as an RRAG director, he condemns the land dispossession and the violence in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. He talked up in 2024 about there was a massive arson attack there, and he's criticized the failed 1997 Chittagong Hill Tract Peace Accord, urging the United Nations to intervene and address the ongoing abuses. So, Dr. Sumas Chakma, the floor is yours.
How many minutes, Chris?
You've got 10, 15 minutes. Up to
you. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me for this session. I think it's very important for people in Europe and the Bangladeshis in Europe, especially, to know actually what is happening in Bangladesh as well as in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. I think I'll make some preliminary remarks about the overall situation in Bangladesh, then go into CHT, the Chittagong Hill Tracts. And I think we are Bangladesh, as you had said, at a crossroad. I think one of the reasons for being in the crossroad is the belief of the international community that this government is actually committed to reforms. And the European Union, the United Nations, and lots of other countries in the world just supporting reforms without understanding whether this government has the mandate, willingness to carry out reforms. And reforms have become the excuse to remain in power as long as possible. So you could see on the drop of a hat, Dr. Yunus is actually establishing Reforms Commission. After all the commissions have submitted their reforms, and he established the Okamoto Commission, which is National Commission for Unity. Then he set up a commission to inquire into the electoral malpractices in the last 3 elections, which are in any case covered in all these reform committees which have already been established. So one could see that one after the another commission is being established. I even have lost the count of the number of commissions which they have set up. And international community still believes that actually this government is committed to reforms without a parliament. So they are just bringing ordinances whose lifeline is only about 6 months. And the worst thing is that this government has no legal standing at this point of time to remain in power. Because in December, the High Court of Bangladesh had restored the 13th Amendment of the Constitution of Bangladesh, in a way restoring the interim government. And the interim government could actually remain in power only for 3 months. So their term has already ended if you follow the rule of law. So at this point of time, what we have in Bangladesh is actually anarchy, because the government doesn't accept the constitution. They pick up provisions of the constitution which they like, and provisions of the laws which they like. But when you do not have the constitution itself functioning, then where do you go? But I think international community still believes, because Sheikh Hasina was so bad, that all these things could be allowed. And I just wonder because I follow Bangladesh very regularly, if Yunus was in power for 15 years, what would that happen? Because just in less than a year's time, what we see today, he has, in a way, in terms of human rights violation, could possibly match what Hasina had done. So that's the perspective which we come as far as Bangladesh is concerned. So if that's the general situation for Bangladeshis, what could happen to the Chittagong Hill Tracts, which is always not on the map. It's a small region. Geographically, it covers about 10% of the territories, but less than 1% of the populations who are the indigenous peoples of that region. And if you ask us today, because many of the people who are there belong to my community, I think they have reached, in a way, dead-end situation. They had seen General Ershad and the military administration prior to that. They had seen the BNP, Awami League, BNP at different point of time, different interim governments. For the first time, I think we had faith on some people who were selling the idea of revolution, the idea of inclusivity, because after all, this movement was started on the premise of anti-discrimination movement. And what we see today are, I think, worst form of discrimination, which we had never seen in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. So if you look at the entire reform process, there is no space for any indigenous person and any Hindu minority, because no one has been included in the Reforms Commission, especially the Constitutional Reform Commission. And if you look at the reforms which have been undertaken, the recommendations which have been made, there is no reference to whatsoever on indigenous peoples, Upajati, scheduled tribe, whatever terminologies you use in the entire what's constitutional reform process, which was chaired by Ali Riaz. There is no reference whatsoever to these people, as if they do not exist. So they could not even find the term, who are these people? So in a way, you do not exist in the terminology. And I think recently they amended the law, which they are saying, in which they provide that indigenous peoples will not be identified as small minorities, Khudro Nigosti, and they thought they will, take on something which has been discarded by Trump. So they included diversity, and they still do not know in which direction they are going. So in a way, the people of the Chittagong tracts have no space whatsoever in the constitutional reform process. You do not exist, and because you do not exist in the Chittagong tracts, in the peace process, in the constitutional reform process, you do not exist anywhere. And in fact, the first statement which was made by Yunus when he went to visit the UN General Assembly last year on 2nd of October, in an interview to Voice of America, he said, Chittagong Tracts Accord is not something which can be dealt with the current government, and it should be dealt with the elected government. No one knows when the elected government will come. So at that point of time, I think he basically told the people of Chittagong Tracts that you actually do not belong to Bangladesh. So the question arises, if you are having a reform process, if you are not included or given any space, then where would these people go? And that's what I think we have seen, that the tremendous amount of human rights violations which we have seen. And I think we have mentioned about the violence which took place in September last year, from the 19th of September, 20th September, then 1st of October. I think these incidents are not new. But there was one particular new element, which was the fact that 3 advisors of the government of Bangladesh, they went and visited the Chittagong Tracts. And they set up a commission of inquiry by the additional division commissioner of Chittagong, Mr. Nuri. And they said in 14 days' time, we'll provide the report. And as of now, I think it's about 9 months, people have not seen the report. So what do we see? We basically see that there is absolute impunity. And I think what we have seen in the current government is that whenever some human rights violation takes place, and Dr. Yunus speaks as if he's in some university and saying and telling people, you should not do this, you should not do that, and these are misinformation, etc., etc. But for God's sake, you are the prime minister of the country. You run the government. You have the police, you have the judiciary, and you have to act like the government. And he doesn't act. So whether it's the violations of the rights of the minorities or in the Chittagong Tracts, what he does is basically give some lame excuses. Then it dies off, and he has set up this disinformation unit, which I say disinformation, this press wing fact check, which is funded by the British through a company in the UK. This agency uses disinformation, this press wing fact check. It itself manufactures. In fact, we had some dispute with an organization called Dismiss Lab with respect to certain figures in CHT. There was some internal communication. And you can imagine that the chief advisor's press secretary or press wing goes and alleges on record that we are intimidating certain fact-checking unit. These are our internal communication. There might be divergence of views, but you should not be privy to it unless they are your organizations. So what this government has done is to set up huge number of disinformation centers, again funded by the foreign donors who believe that this is part of reform. So we have complete impunity. And the last point which I want to mention about the Chittagong Tract is that the Chittagong Tract Accord was signed in 1997. From 1997 till today, so many presidents had to flee. The chief of army staffs had to flee. The generals had to flee. The Chief Justice Sarath Sinha had to flee. Prime ministers had to flee. Opposition leaders had to flee. But they have not done anything with respect to Chittagong tracks. Shantullah Ma still continues as the chairman of the CHT Regional Council without election for the last 27 years. Without election. So democracy, which is the basis for which they, dismissed Hasina's government, it has not reached Chittagong tracks. The last election in the Chittagong tracks, both the Hill District Councils and Regional Council had never election. The Hill District Council was organized by General Ersad in 1989. So from 1989 till today, we have not seen election. Why? We have not seen election simply because the government of Bangladesh, under the instruction of the military, they don't want the conflict to end. Because if the conflict ends, then they will not have the raison d'etre to remain in CHT. They cannot play such a powerful role in Bangladesh. And if you look at it, because the elections are held, and the elections everywhere around the world are used to build relationship between the communities, and you have to depend on each other. Tribal has to get an indigenous person has to get the votes of the Muslims. Muslim population have to get the votes of the indigenous population. So you create some kind of a symbiotic relationship. But the Bangladesh army doesn't want it. That's why no election had taken place. So everybody has been dismissed, even in the district council, but not in the Chittagong tracks. Then what do we have? We have state-sponsored terrorism, because which most people in Bangladesh and most people in the European Union do not know, that Shantullah Ma's Parbat Chittagram Janashankati Samiti, which signed the peace accord, they also maintain an armed group. Now the question is, if you are in power, exercising the legal authority given under the Regional Council Act, under what laws of the Bangladesh or anywhere else, you could have your own private army. And if you read the Indian newspapers, you could see that they are recruiting child soldiers. They are engaged in drug trafficking. They are engaged in arms smuggling. And these are not my saying. You search in the internet, you could find it. Then final question arises: why would Yunus allow this? Yunus allows this because he wants the indigenous peoples to remain in conflict, and that is where the Rohingya issue is so critical. And if you look at the report of the International Crisis Group, Dangers of a Rohingya Insurgency, which has just been released on 18th of June, it was perfect, correct, everything. But it failed to mention one particular fact, that the Rohingya insurgents are not only in Cox's Bazar. They are mainly in the Chittagong tracts. They are in Bandarban districts. There is a free zone which is being created. Then we have an insurgency which is coming up, and the last risk which we have is that at some point of time the donor agencies will run away because they can't fund the Rohingyas, because Myanmar's government will not take. Then the entire population outbursts into CHT. Then we again suffer. I think the last point which I wanted to mention is that in the entire process, I think we have to bear in mind that when Yunus came to power, everybody thought he was a Nobel laureate. I think during my first briefing for the diplomats in Delhi, I said, we do not know the worldview of Yunus. I disagree with what Hasina had done. Had raised questions about the violations. But I think one particular point I always agreed with former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, when she said that Yunus is nothing but a shoot code. In India, I have seen how the microcredit agencies work, how the EMI agents work, and if we understand a common EMI agent, if we understand how the microcredit agencies work, just because somebody has got the Nobel Prize, he is not necessarily a Nobel person. And the fact that he has failed to address basic human rights issues or establish accountability shows that, I think we are on the wrong path, and the CHT people will suffer, not necessarily because of this government policy, but because of the Rohingya issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Suhas. That was a very good testimony. So we move on to our last and final speaker, Professor Dr. Mohammed Habib Malat. He was a cardiac surgeon, a former Awami League politician. He has MBBSs, FRCSs. He's got Harvard training. He's championed health security and women's empowerment. He served as vice chairman of the Bangladesh Red Crescent Society, and also has been a president of the Interparliamentary Union's Health Committee in 2017. So, Professor Habib Malat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks the organizer of European Bangladesh Forum and also Narrative 360 and Bridge Bangla 24. I am proud to have two speakers like Pushpita Gupta and Suhas Chakma. I'm really proud. I have heard about a lot of things about them. I'm really as a co-speaker with them. And first of all, before going to the issue today, I want to speak one thing. As you said, Chris, that 1,400 people was died. That was in the United Human Rights Council report. I know that is right. But how did they get the number? Because if you see, Jamaat-e-Islam has published a book. It's a 10-volume big book, and they found 691 person was killed at that time. And then Bangladesh Health Ministry published a list of people died in that time was 834. Where United Nations gets this number, I'm still confused, and I'm always confused about that. And another thing, Mr. Suhas Chakma said that in Bangladeshi constitution, the interim government is for 3 months. In Bangladesh constitution, there is no provision of interim government at all. We have never heard about that. And caretaker government, it was there and it is coming. So it may be for 3 months, but they are, as you said, that they took over the power and they're running as they want. Now, if we come to the subject, for today, I want to discuss about the religious persecution in Bangladesh. I want to go back a little bit in the history and then I'll come back to the main point. Religious persecution in Bangladesh continue to be shaped by complex interplay of historical, culture, social, and political forces. Despite the country's focusing principle was secularism, violence and discrimination against religious and ethnic minorities have intensified in recent months. With over 90% population identifying as Muslim, predominantly Sunni, Bangladesh is home to a diverse religious landscape that includes significant Hindu minority, approximately 8%, along with small communities like Buddhists, Christians, Ahmadiyya Muslims. Hindu particularly have historically contributed significantly to the Bangladeshi culture and heritage. In 1972, the constitution in Bangladesh enshrined secularism as a core principle of newly independent state at the time. However, the commitment shifted in 1988 when then President Hussain Mohammad Irshad amended the constitution to declare Islam as the state religion. Since then, growing pattern of religious intolerance has emerged, exacerbated by political instability and weak law enforcement and social discrimination. Following the political changes in August 2024, incidents of religious persecution have been a sharp rise. According to the report gathered from local human rights organizations and independent sources, over 2,400 incidents of violence against religious and ethnic minorities have been documented between August 2024 and June this year. Key statistics during this period include 32 deaths attributed to targeted attacks to the minorities or ethnic communities, over 1,200 properties of the ethnic minorities or Hindus, homes, business, and farms damaged, looted, or set fire, Dozens of temples vandalized or destroyed. As I came to the temple, as Pushpita mentioned that it was in the illegal places. No, it's not 100% right, because of usually it's not only the temple, the mosque, madrasas are usually in those places that are provided by the government. And it's a railway has a huge land in Bangladesh, and people are using for many for their staying there, they're building school, they're building religious madrasas, mosque, temple. So there should not be a big issue at all. I just told about the Bangladesh condition. More than 23 reported cases of rape or gang rape linked to the communal violence. It also shows that over 200 reported human rights violation against indigenous community, including 21 murder and more than 6,000 people who have suffered or affected. Many of these cases remaining unreported due to media censorship, local social stigma, or fear of retaliation. Victims and witnesses are often reluctant to come forward, citing a lack of trust of authorities and inadequate legal protections. Hindu community remain the primary target, but report indicates growing threats and attack against Buddhist, Christians, and Ahmadiyya communities as well. Indigenous groups in Chittagong Hill Tracts have also faced escalating violence, including forced eviction and land grabs. While the Bangladesh government has occasionally responded with arrest and policy statements, critics argue that official action are frequently slow, insufficient, and politically motivated. Human rights activists have called for stronger enforcement for existing laws, judicial accountability, and proactive measures to ensure the safety and dignity of religious and ethnic groups. International human rights organizations have urged global attention to the crisis. Many are calling for independent investigations, increased humanitarian support, and international pressure on Bangladesh government to uphold its constitutional obligations. As violence continues and faith in justice system erodes, the safety of Bangladesh minorities communities remain precarious. Without decisive domestic reform and sustainable international scrutiny, observers warn that the situation could deteriorate further. Thank you very much. I stop here.
Thank you for that. Unfortunately, everyone, we haven't got time for follow-up questions. So I would like concluding remarks. Does anybody think like what will happen in the future with Bangladesh? What would you like to see? My personal, I want to see an inclusive general election. I think everybody should be invited. If Jamaat-e-Islami is allowed to reform, BNP is allowed to reform. They've kicked out all the cases against them. Major cases against corruption, terrorism, you name it, have all been washed away. Why can't the Awami League? Why can't they stretch that? If there's going to be a new Bangladesh, it has to include everyone. So that's my closing thought for today. Could we go to Pushpita first? We'll stick in order. Oh, you're on mute, Pushpita.
It was not letting me. Thank you. You said it all. Yes, me too. Want an inclusive election, and that is there is no other option. And also, I would like to see Chinmoy Krishnadas get a bail, because he's a monk and he has a very special lifestyle, and he has been very, very unwell. His mom is crying and begging everyone to get him a bail, but obviously you probably heard that he had a bail and then they put him on murder case. So this is insane, because he was in jail when the murder had happened, and then he was put in jail again, and we don't know what's going to happen to him, and we are not allowed to visit him either. So we want a inclusive election as well as we want Chinmay Krishna Das Prabhu to get the bail unconditionally. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Pushpita. And Suhas, any recommendations or what you would like to see going forward?
Well, I think the Chittagong Treks people deserve election for the local bodies which were established. There was no election in the CHT Regional Council from 1998. It's time that this government or this interim government at least allows the election in the CHT Regional Council. There were no elections in the Three Hill District Council of Rangamati, Bandarban, and Khagrachari district from 1989. So I think democracy should not in Bangladesh should not mean democracy minus Chittagong Treks. I think it should include the elections in these Chittagong Treks, and in fact, the prior elections in the CHT should be held prior to the national elections.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. Actually, with a little test or a taste for democracy. I think we would have seen more from Yunus
Yes,
on that front as well. So, Professor Habib Malat, your closing thoughts?
I have 2 points. Number one, free, fair, inclusive election, including all political parties within a very short time. Number two, judicial system shouldn't be controlled by the government or pressure group or any political parties. We should do something about that. Thank you.
Excellent. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our guests on behalf of the European Bangladesh Forum. And I think it's been an illuminating session that we've had, and hopefully we can have some more in the future. This is the sort of, I think, the concluding part of 2, but we'll obviously be having more webinars in the future. And obviously there's a lot to talk about in Bangladesh. I think hope has gone for a lot of people, and we'd like to see it be restored. So thank you, and thank you to our guests. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Good
you.
evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.